Antarctica. To visit the coldest, the windiest, the highest and the driest continent is to voyage to another world, to a land of rock and ice, where nature is at her most savage, wondrous and bizarre, and where we are the outsiders who do not belong. Here, shelves of floating ice the size of countries lie in the shadow of a volcano active for 19 million years. Antarctica is a continent isolated by a savage sea, and reaching it means a voyage of several days from a handful of places which are already at the ends of the inhabited world. One of these is Hobart, Tasmania, and Antarctica lies 1,500 uninterrupted miles south of this headland at the mouth of the Derwent River. The ship that was to carry us in safety and comfort across the desolate wastes of the Southern Ocean was the Bremen, a purpose-built expedition ship of 7,000 tons, which was no stranger to these waters. Once clear of the land, the voyage south took on a timelessness with the motion of the ship and the rhythm of the ocean, always changing yet remaining unchanged. We were escorted by that most magnificent of birds, the wandering albatross. The days were filled with lectures on what we could expect to see and what had happened in the past. We stopped en route at Macquarie Island, one of a handful of sub-Antarctic islands scattered across the Southern Ocean. Discovered in 1810, its population of wildlife was soon decimated by sealers looking first for fur and then for oil rendered down from whales, elephant seals, and even penguins. The island is still plagued by cats and rabbits.
I've been here for 16 months and I enjoyed most of it, nearly all of it anyway. I'm looking forward to going home. I'm going home in 3 months' time. That'll be 19 months on the island. My girlfriend said, don't come home and you're rough and you left. I'm just going to get a damn shock when I get home. You people are putting money into the island. That's coming to us. That's getting rid of all the cats and the rabbits on the island. So let's all come again and get into it. Thanks very much for your listening.
In any landing, a shore party first goes ahead to reconnoitre and establish a landing site. Macquarie is 21 miles long and 2 miles in width. On average, it rains, snows, or hails on 317 days out of the year. A fleet of Zodiacs was swiftly launched to take us ashore. We were soon on the beach, enjoying the unique experience of being surrounded by wildlife, which showed only curiosity at our presence. Aquaria Island is home to several penguin species, including the kings, shown here. The brightness of the king's yellow is linked to diet. A better diet means a more intense color, so the females are attracted to the males, whose plumage indicates a more successful hunter. Elephant seals lie around like blubber on the beach, their lassitude giving no hint of their prowess underwater, where they can dive to 4,000 feet, hold their breath for 2 hours, and slow their heart to 1 beat per minute. These are royal penguins, which breed in intensely crowded and noisy rookeries, with each nest just beyond pecking distance of its neighbor. King penguins, like their cousins, the larger emperors, do not build nests, but keep their eggs and, after they hatch, their chicks on their feet, under a fold of skin. Young male elephant seals practice play fighting to prepare them for adulthood, when they will have to compete in earnest for breeding rights to the females. A pair of Gentoo penguins shows indifference to one of the zodiacs being readied for the return journey to the ship. Underway once more, we resumed our journey towards the frozen south, enjoying Bremen's first-class amenities. The radar picked up our first iceberg as we approached the convergence, where the warmer waters from further north met those from the frigid south. It was just a small berg, but this picture of an Arctic berg provides a dramatic illustration of what lies hidden beneath the water.
We'll leave it on our port side, sir.
The crossing of the Antarctic Circle was marked by a ceremony similar to the tradition practiced when crossing the equator, except, of course, for the snow. Shortly thereafter, we made a stop at remote Scott Island, discovered on Christmas Day 1902. Its most prominent feature is the 200-foot Haggett's Pillar. The sea was too rough to permit a landing, but the ship circumnavigated this tiny speck, lost in the vastness of the Southern Ocean. Now in true Antarctic waters, we pass through fields of floating ice. Meanwhile, lectures continued, and historian and Antarctic explorer Sid Kirkby told us tales of the past and of what lay in store for us at our first landing on the continent at Cape Adare.
They only survived by pulling all of the dogs on the station into the tent with them. Seeing there were 7 men in the party and they had 75 dogs, one can only conclude that was some tent. And if you just stand quietly and soak it in, it will absolutely knock you out. I swear blind that there is not a photographer on God's earth who can take away from Antarctica 1/10 of the feeling of it that you can by standing and feeling it. So please do.
Our first sight of Antarctica was the spectacular Admiralty Mountains, which were dominated by Mount Minto at 13,500 feet. The waters were littered with icebergs, floes, bergy bits and brash. Cape Adare, discovered by James Ross in 1841, is the site of the largest Adelie penguin colony in the world, with 270,000 breeding pairs, whose nesting sites extended high up the steep slopes. The ship nudged its way through the ice, shouldering aside the floes to the alarm of the locals. Preceded, as usual, by the shore party, the landings were soon underway through mirror-calm waters and sensational scenery. Once ashore, we found ourselves surrounded by the sounds and smells of vast numbers of Adelie penguins. The adults were continuously harassed by the incessant demands of their young. Cape Adare is the site of the first overwintering in 1899 by a party led by Borchgrevink. during which one man died and who is buried high up among the rocks. The hut still survives, and we were privileged to go inside, being the first people to do so for 2 years.
You'll see the bunks around the side. Originally there were 10 men there, and one of the little lamps that they were using, naked flames, set fire to that curtain, and how they were able to prevent that from completely destroying the hut is quite surprising.
We continued south past Cape Adair through the ice-strewn Ross Sea. We make our first landing on Ross Island at Cape Bird. The young are corralled into a creche for protection from the ever-vigilant skuas who bring death from the skies. A lone chick like this one is very vulnerable to attack, unless protected by adult birds. This footage shot by another cameraman illustrates a vicious attack on a young Adélie. A narrow escape this time. Death in the form of leopard seals and killer whales also lies in wait beneath the water. There is a natural hesitation before taking the plunge, until pressure from the back of the queue pushes the first in line over the edge. If nothing untoward happens, the rest soon follow suit. Ice impedes the zodiacs and has to be towed away. Ross Island is a prominent and historically important feature of the Ross Sea. It is dominated by Mount Erebus, which, at 12,350 feet, is the world's most southerly volcano. It has been active for 19 million years, and in a 1985 eruption ejected car-sized rocks 1 kilometer into the sky. Our second landing on Ross Island was at Cape Evans, the site of Scott's second hut. Built in 1911 in the shadow of Mount Erebus, it was from here that his ill-fated polar party set out, from which 5 members, including Scott himself, failed to return. A total of 8 men left this hut, never to return, and there remain eerie reminders of their distant dramas. One of Aurora's anchors lies buried in the volcanic sand, and this skeleton of a dog has remained chained to its tether for 80 years. The cross on Windvane Hill commemorates 3 of the deaths and stands lonely sentinel over a bleak landscape. We had been in perpetual daylight since we had crossed the Antarctic Circle, and late one evening we cruised along the edge of the ice which barred our way to McMurdo Sound and Hut Point, the site of Scott's first hut, built in 1902. Here we reached 77.4 degrees south latitude and enjoyed a magical evening in the company of a pod of killer whales. Our next landing on Ross Island was just a few miles north at Cape Royds, where we trudged across the fast ice to Shackleton's hut, which was built in 1902, and from which Shackleton and his party had set out to reach the South Pole. By the time they had returned to this very hut, they had walked and hauled supplies for 1,700 miles, only to turn back just 97 miles short of their goal, because Shackleton realized that had they continued, they would reach the pole but never be able to make it back alive. David Harryfield of the New Zealand Heritage Trust explained to us what steps were being taken to preserve the artifacts in this and other huts.
What we're doing now, though, is addressing this sort of problem. So we have a man from Australia here with us this week who's a specialist in metal conservation, and he is experimenting with different coatings and so on to preserve these pretty rare artefacts. And many of them appear in actual photographs. Here's a meal, still being cooked, a bit of bread or something in the frying pan. Isn't that a beautiful story? But the hut itself was found to be very cold. New Zealanders, including myself, over 20 years ago slept in here occasionally before we had a refuge hut on site, and it was a damn cold place, believe me. Those are German beer bottles. They need treatment, of course, to the metal fittings. English cocoa, people who've had it, people in the 50s who came here often sampled some of the food. They said it was very rich. Of course, on the 20th, next Tuesday, we celebrate our 40th anniversary at Scott Boats. So this is the very famous hut where Sir Ernest Shackleton did all those wonderful things that you're familiar with, of course, from your lecturers and Paul and so forth on the ship. So you're standing on pretty hallowed ground here, and it's a really rare privilege to come into this place.
Cape Royds is the site of the most southerly penguin colony on the shores of Pony Lake. We walked across the fast ice towards the Bremen, anchored in Backdoor Bay, with steam from Mount Erebus drifting in the frigid air. The calm conditions continue as we circumnavigate the coast of Ross Island amid a fleet of strangely shaped floes. We are on our way to visit the Ross Ice Shelf, which to seaward presents a line of ice cliffs 600 miles long and averaging 80 feet high, with an additional 560 feet hidden beneath the water, which here is nearly 2,000 feet deep. The shelf extends inward for 500 miles and is the size of France. For US viewers, its face is the distance between the Oregon and Mexico borders and extending inland as far as the Grand Canyon. 3 years after this video was shot, an iceberg the size of Connecticut broke off from the Ross Ice Shelf. And 2 years after that, a second, even larger berg, 125 miles long, 25 miles wide, and 650 feet thick, joined it to block access to the Ross Sea and McMurdo Sound. The penguin colony at Cape Royds suffered, as the adult birds had to walk 25 miles to reach open water over the choked pack ice. We crossed the Ross Sea to its eastern shore, passing the Campbell Glacier, within sight of Antarctica's other volcano, Mount Melbourne, just under 9,000 feet high. We were on our way to visit the Italian base at Terranova Bay, but to reach it, Bremen has to push her way through a maze of ice floes. The base is only occupied during the summer months and practices a policy of zero pollution by processing and reusing all wastewater, even for drinking.
200 kilometers north from here for the geological studies. A camp, 27 days camp, and 12 people involved in this camp.
Despite being due for a relaunch within the hour, the Zodiacs undergo the usual meticulous cleaning and inspection while the ship is underway. The Bremen has once again to pick her way through the maze of floes before reaching open water. Once clear, she heads towards the Campbell ice tongue, which lined the horizon. The Zodiacs cruise alongside this floating glacier, which extends 10 miles out from the land. As we head north along the rugged coast, the ice becomes ever thicker.
sitting on the floe waiting for us. Come to the port side of the ship to look at 2 emperor penguins. If you can see through the binoculars, you'll notice that there is still some down on one of the penguins. This means first year emperor penguin chick that is still fledging, that is waiting to go into the sea.
Emperors can dive to 1,600 feet and stay submerged for 20 minutes. Ice thwarted our plans to visit Cape Hallett or Foyne Island, so we continued north to Robertson Bay, just beyond our first landing site at Cape Adair.
020.
En route, we are debriefed by our lecturers on what we had seen and what we might have missed.
He was a botanist who works on plants on the top of Mount Melbourne. Now, I don't know about you, but when he told me there were plants on the top of Mount Melbourne, I was a little disbelieving at first. But he works on these tiny little micro fungi that live in the soil. And because Mount Melbourne is a active volcano, the soil temperature up there is quite warm, and these guys can survive up there. But it raises interesting questions about how these things even get there in the first place. You know, do they blow in? They certainly can't get there by birds, because birds don't fly that in those sort of places. So do they come on the wind? Are there remnants from when Antarctica was a much warmer place? All sorts of interesting questions arising from the fact that plants can grow at 3,000 metres in Antarctica.
Strong winds blowing dust and soil out there, and that also absorbs some of the radiation and increases the melt off the glacier tongue. Below the snow layers is probably the true glacier ice that's come down through the mountains. It's brought all its history with it, its crevasses and its holes and its caves, and they get eaten out by the wind blowing into them. One of the things you will have noticed, there weren't many large caves down at the sea level, and that's because we've got a glacier tongue that's very far south. The amount of open water around it would only be there for maybe 6 to 8 weeks maximum before it starts freezing up again. So there's a very short period throughout the year when the waves can get there and undercut and bring those crevasses into nice carved out caves. If you saw that same glacier tongue around, say, Moreton or Davis, which is quite a few degrees north, it would be full of very, very large caves, and you'd see the beautiful blue colours that we could see part of in some of the ones higher up in the glacier tongue itself.
Not sub-adults really, they're still juveniles. When we talk about birds, juveniles is the first year. Any other sub-adult year are immatures, and then we have adults. Adults only once they're breeding. These were juveniles. And they had a little bit of down left, about 6 months old. And it was a bit of a surprise to see the down, because they really shouldn't be at sea swimming if they got any down on them. It's quite possible that these birds haven't actually been in the water. They may have been on that ice which is broken off from their colony. That would be some of the tail end of the breeding. So I feel like they're still floating around waiting to lose that down, and they can hit the water.
Now, ocean crust is very different to continental crust. If this keeps going, we'll ultimately get basaltic lavas on the seafloor, and you'll have true oceanic floor as opposed to continents, which are made of things like granite. Well, this colleague of mine was down here in AD 81, and within an hour the barometer dropped 30 millibars, and they went from calm conditions to winds of over 120 knots. And they were sort of up over against the mountain range we can see there, and the ship faced into the wind and was under full power trying to hold position and was having great difficulty. It was slowly getting blown back across the bay. They'd just taken 2 helicopters on board before the weather got really bad, and as they were trying to secure them, one of the sailors got blown overboard. Luckily he fell onto sea ice and broke his leg, unluckily. And the helicopter's blades were slapping around so much they actually slapped into each other and the helicopters were damaged. And they just deployed a party of geologists up one of the glaciers, and they didn't have time to get their tent put up, so they promptly blew away down the glacier and smashed into several thousand pieces. And they huddled behind some rocks and snowbanks and things for about 12 hours until this wind blew itself out. So consider yourself very lucky. The weather that we've encountered so far has been fantastic.
Alas, he spoke too soon. Conditions at Cape Adare were very different from our first visit, and plans for a second landing had to be abandoned. The storm grew to a full force 12 gale, with winds of 80 miles an hour and waves of 50 feet. Throughout the storm, our albatross escorts revelled in the wild weather and conveyed a calming effect through their effortless flight. we had planned to stop at Campbell Island to visit albatross nesting sites, but it was still too rough to effect a safe landing. Instead, Bremen entered Perseverance Harbour to pick up a group of scientists, as transportation to and from these remote islands is not easy to arrange. Wind gusts in excess of 35 knots occur 280 days a year on Campbell Island, and gusts in excess of 50 knots on at least 100 days.
May I present a new species of penguin, the red penguins.
Instead, we visit Enderby Island, whose rugged coast was, in the days of sail, the graveyard of many ships and their unfortunate crews. At last we are able to get close to the Royal Albatross, whose prowess in flight had so impressed us as they swooped so effortlessly alongside the ship. It is hard to gauge the size of these birds when they are sitting on a nest, but their beaks are 10 inches long and they have a wingspan of 11 feet. Albatross young stay at sea for up to 6 years after leaving the nest, and the adult birds mate for life and live 60 to 70 years. Tracking devices show they cover as much as 7,000 miles during the week they spend collecting food to bring back to their chick. These islands are also the home of the rare yellow-eyed penguins. Other birds on Enderby include the shag and the red-crowned parakeet. Hooker sea lions are another endangered species which breed on Enderby Island. In common with many other species, the adolescent males like to throw their weight around.
They'll be hanging around the outskirts.
The night before our arrival in Hobart was marked by a farewell party to the accompaniment of the musicians from Poland and the serving of champagne. Captain Ayer, who was on his 80th trip to Antarctica, gave us his farewell address.
Remember the welcome speech, which I mentioned. We hope growing together as expedition family. And shortly, after some days, we made it together. We all, together with my crew members, we are 262 souls on board. And as I mentioned already one time, I would like to invite the 311 presidents of the 311 countries, as we have 2 ships load full, to go to Antarctica and back. For sure, their mind on several items would be much clearer when they saw this world. That you have a little piece of this end of the world, of this paradise, in your heart, here on board side. I don't like to go through all the stops or through all the landings. Finally, with our Zodiac fleet, we made together 12 landings. Don't take always the camera. Try also with your 2 radar eyes and see this country. I hope you have done it. The Antarctica is in your heart, and I like and love it also very, very much. I wish you a safe flight back home. Thank you und auf Wiedersehen.
Sailor, what shall we do with the drunken sailor? Early in the
What shall we do with the drunken lecturer?
Hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises early in the morning. Put him in the longboat till he's sober, put him in the longboat till he's sober, put him in the longboat till he's sober early in the morning. Hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises early in the morning. Put him in the bed with the captain's daughter, put him in the bed with the captain's daughter, put him in the bed with the captain's daughter early in the morning. Hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises early in the morning. That's what we do with a drunken sailor, that's what we do with a drunken sailor, that's what we do with a drunken sailor early in the morning. Hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises early in the morning. Hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises early in the morning.
And so, after 22 days and 5,794 nautical miles, we arrived back in Hobart to be greeted by a choir of students from local schools.
Everyone